Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 48. My name is NBZ, and I'm joined here, as always, by Bally. Hello Bally, how are you doing?
Hi NBZ, I'm not too bad, just enjoying, we're getting to the end of summer, and it's all a bit depressing, but,
It is. I mean, today, actually, you wouldn't be able to tell it was summer in Scotland, because there was rain for like 50 minutes, and then it was so hot. Look, we get all four seasons in one day in this place. So yeah, it's not the best, but we will continue on. But Bally is not the only one joining us this week. We have our second guest to the podcast, which is very exciting.
Dun dun dun.
Indeed, drum rolls, please. So from many places on the internet, from Unseen64 and does stuff for Nintendo Life, and also the general Twitter sphere. We have Liam, also known as Tamaki.
Hey.
Hello. How are you doing?
Hi everyone. I'm pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, we're doing well here. Lots of things that we are going to be able to talk about with you. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah, excited. I'm glad to be on. I normally listen when I get the time, I listened to the last one about Chris Pranger, so
yes.
Yeah, happy to be on.
Excellent, good stuff. So for people who don't know what you do you want to give people a quick rundown of stuff you do on the internet?
Yeah, sure. So I'm I don't really know what I am. I'm just like a dude who does things for different people.
A renegade.
Yes, I'm a lone wolf. No, people mainly know me for doing like historical research on video games that went missing, lost games, cancelled games, unreleased games, cut content from games, that kind of thing. I talk to former developers and kind of leak information that wasn't supposed to be out and that kind of thing. I'm the person who digs that kind of stuff up, and normally I put those kind of findings on unseen64.net, which is an archive for cancelled games, and also I do reports for Nintendo Life now as well occasionally,
Not to be confused with this podcast.
No.
Which is the one thing that we were thinking, like, when we made the name change, was like, oh yeah, there's that website called Nintendo Life.
Not that Nintendo Life, Nintendo Life.
This Nintendo... Exactly. Absolutely. So yeah, lots of good work that you do all over the place. And yeah, I guess we'll talk about that in one of our segments. But Bally, before we do that, how about you tell us what the segments are going to be this week?
Yeah, so as usual, we're going to talk about what we've been playing. We've got a couple of emails to dash through, and then hopefully spend a nice chunky segment with Liam talking about all the stuff you do and what you've been working on, and certain things that you have revealed. Hopefully.
All right.
Yeah, I guess we're going to kick things off with the games that we've been playing recently. Bally, you have yet again taken one of my own video games for yourself to play.
Well, I appreciate it very much, MBZ, because this is an absolute cracker of a game. So after Yoshi's Woolly Woes, I decided I needed to play a 2D platformer that was, a bit more up my alley. So I went with Rayman Legends, and
yes,
it is. I was going to say Origins for a second there.
Yeah, well, you could be confused because there are loads of Origins levels in this game.
True. So Rayman Legends, it feels an awful lot like, in terms of pacing, like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze and DK Returns, which is, as listeners will know, is my absolute favorite 2D platformer. So I really like just the pacing of it. So it mixes up the style of levels tremendously. So a lot of them are kind of runner based, where there might be like a wall of fire chasing after you. It's just a case of platforming through the level as quickly as possible, which I really enjoy. And then there's slightly slower sections that are more exploration based, and those are similar to DK as well. And obviously my two favorite prerequisites are fulfilled very nicely, which are the art and the music. It's got a really sort of orchestral soundtrack, which it almost sounds quite medieval. It's got like a real fantasy theme that it's trying to go for.
Yeah, you also have like the noises of the lums and everything thrown in there, which is an interesting addition. Yeah, kind of like Bing and Bong along.
And the art style it's two-dimensional, but not completely. It's almost cel-shaded. It's quite hard to describe, actually.
Well, I mean, it's in the Ubi art engine, right? So it's like hand-drawn stuff that goes straight onto, well, this is how I understand it anyway, I'm not sure if this is in reality, but games like Child of Light and Valiant Hearts, and obviously these two Rayman games where they can draw art assets and just drop them straight into the game, so it just looks beautiful, absolutely stunning.
Yeah, no, it really looks incredible, and I don't know if I prefer the art style or not to Tropical Freeze, but it works really nicely for this game. So I'm through the first two worlds. I've not completely finished the second world. I have to say the standout moment so far is the music level at the end of World 1. And what I mean by that, this is quite hard to describe, but so it's a runner-based level, like I said, where you're running away from something, and a musical theme is playing. So in this case, it's the theme. Black Betty, and the thing is that with the rhythm of the music and the beats and the notes of the actual music, you will have to dodge enemies and make jumps in time with the music, almost like a game like Bit Trip Runner.
Yeah, I was just about to compare it to that.
Yeah, definitely. And like, it's only at the end of this world, and I believe there's one per world, which is maybe a little bit too infrequent, but I can imagine they take quite a lot of work to get going, so that's understandable. But those are probably my favorite moments. My least favorite moments, I'd have to say, are easily unfortunately the gamepad focused levels. I think they're quite interesting, the way that you're kind of, I mean, because they're designed for co-op. So because I'm playing by myself, it's a bit sort of awkward because
you have to rely on the AI, right, which can be a bit awkward at points.
And I'm just sort of creating platforms, cutting down levers and things just to make sure the character can get through the level, and it's like I'm just this guy on the side watching this person watching the computer enjoy a level that would have been quite fun.
Unfortunately, in those levels, it doesn't let you play as Rayman.
No, exactly.
You have to play as Murphy, the like little touchpad character.
Precisely.
Whereas weirdly in the other versions, the Xbox One and the other versions that I've played those as well. You can play as Rayman in those.
Oh, that's really frustrating.
How does that work then? Are you able to like bust through the stuff that you have to make disappear, or have they redesigned them in some way to make that?
I can't really remember. I think like the computer does Murphy or something.
Oh wow, okay. So he basically like creates a path, and then you are the the AI character.
Yeah, and also it does let you play as Murphy, or like like you do in the Wii U version, but instead. Because it's kind of hard to explain, but in the Wii U version, you are tapping very exact points on the gamepad to move things around, and unlike the other versions, it's kind of like automated. It's hard to explain, but it basically button prompts come up on screen.
It's like he will lock on to a certain thing, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like, I don't know, in Zelda when you're locking onto an enemy or something.
What are they called? QRTs? Is that wrong?
No,
QTEs.
QTEs. There we go.
It's kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really have another way to get around that, and I think that's the weird thing about Rayman Legends and its development is it was ready to come out at that one point on Wii U, and it could have been like a really great thing for people at that point in time, and then Ubisoft decided, nah, we're gonna wait and we're gonna save our marketing budget and do it for like all the versions at once, and I don't
all the versions.
All the versions, sorry. Wow, there's a Freudian slip for you. And so they decided, going to hold back and wait until everything was...
Do you know, of the cut level from Rayman Legends?
I don't. How about you enlighten us?
Just to throw a bit of my kind of unseen 64 knowledge in there was this weird like vampire castle level cut from that game.
Okay.
And a friend of mine attended like a tour of Ubisoft Montpellier. It sent me a video of his trip around there where he met Michel Ancel, and he talked about it, and it was this really weird like gothic castle where you'd explore like the garden of the garden grounds, like the outside the castle, and then you go inside, you climb on the rooftops, and you go down into like a a kind of like a Scrooge McDuck basement with all these like gold coins everywhere, and there was like you go down into a wine cellar where it was kind of implied that the house is like ran by like an old like vampire family. And you'd go down into the cellar and see like the ancestors on the walls, and you'd see you had a wine cellar where all of the wine bottles are filled with blood.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and it was... I don't really know why they eventually cut it, but it looks really cool. And sorry, just a plug on Scene 64. We have like art of that
nice.
Deleted level, which pretty much shows what it would have looked like exactly in the UbiArt engine.
Yeah, well, I guess if they've just drawn the art assets, then you can just plant them straight in there.
That's interesting because I know I'm only in World 2, but it seems like there's an unbelievable number of levels in this game. Obviously when you throw in Origins, it just feels like this is going to take 14, 15 hours to get through.
The main bulk of the game is quite short.
Okay, good.
Which is probably why they felt the need to kind of bulk it up.
Yeah, and add those Origins levels. Yeah. I think those Origins levels being added in was a result of it being delayed.
Yes, it was kind of like a consolation prize to say...
That's quite a good prize,
just to just kind of justify it to everyone, because I know they annoyed a lot of the Wii U owners when that happened, and it was just
absolutely.
It was just kind of a peace offering to them to say, well, at least we're doing something, we're using this time to give everyone a bit more content.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of worked out for me, strangely, because I played Rayman Origins, because I got it in a Steam sale that summer, and I hadn't really had too much interest in Legends before that, but I played Origins, I was like, holy shit,
it's brilliant,
this is amazing, like, that really blew me away, so that was part of the reason why I got this at launch, as soon as it came out, which I don't think too many people did. I kind of seem to remember hearing things that Rayman Legends didn't do that well, unfortunately, which is a shame.
I think it's just as good, if not better, apart from the Murphy levels. And I even think that the Murphy levels are good when you're in co-op. It's just...
Yeah, I bet they are, actually. They seem really well designed.
Yeah, they're really good fun when you play them with a friend, and it's not frustrating in the way that like some like new Super Mario Brothers is. It's
where you're just throwing people off the side and bubbling.
Yeah, it's like you kind of take turns to do things.
It's not as simple as creating a platform literally by pressing a square like Super Mario Brothers.
It's not
you're
like
actually cutting ropes and things, which is quite good. But anyway, I'm only 2 worlds in. I'm sure I'll talk about it again in the future. But that's pretty much all I've been playing at the moment. So I guess on to you, Liam. What have you been up to?
Well, I don't really get a lot of time to play video games. I know that sounds like incredibly ironic.
Blasphemy.
Yeah.
for someone who like talks about games and writes about video games, but when I can. I've been playing mainly Rare Replay in my spare time, and Bayonetta 2, so whichever you guys want me to talk about, I can.
I think let's talk about Rare Replay.
Yeah, sure.
It's interesting because it has a lot of relevance to Nintendo.
Yeah, sure.
And neither Bally or I own an Xbox One, so yeah, it'd be good to talk about.
All right, sure. Well, Rare Replay is, as you say, has a lot of relevance to Nintendo's history. There's a lot of games in there that that Rare made alongside Nintendo when they were with them before the buyout from Microsoft. You got Banjo in there, Conker in there, and what I was actually surprised about it was I thought they'd kind of just not acknowledged Nintendo at all, but they really do to quite an extent. Like, the game is filled with all of these like video documentaries where staff from like former Rare staff, current Rare staff come in and talk about like the creation of Banjo and Conker, and they never shy away at any moment from talking about the relationship with Nintendo and how they impacted the game. And
it's really interesting that because if this was the opposite, right, and you were having like Microsoft games on the Nintendo system, the word Microsoft would be nowhere to be found,
Oh, I know. In the Super Smash Bros. Games, like to give you like Snake, for example, in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, you've got all of these. It shows you like the history of Snake.
Right, tells you what games the characters have been in and everything.
They don't refer to the system he was on, because if you go to the gallery with all the trophies, it'll say like, oh, here's Mario, he first appeared on the NES in this year, and then if you go to Snake or even Sonic, it won't even say what systems they were on because they weren't Nintendo. So
Yup.
Yeah, so I think you know, a lot of people have a very negative impression of Microsoft, but I think under Phil Spencer, the new guy, it's a new company, and they're kind of open to, you know, open to acknowledging that Nintendo does genuinely have a place in Rare's history, and you know, Rare probably wouldn't be the company it is today without Nintendo, like undoubtedly. You know, I'm sure NCL and all of the big people like Shigeru Miyamoto and everyone at Nintendo had a huge impact on Rare's history. But anyway, to get back to Rare Replay, as you say, I love it. I think it's a really fantastic compilation. If anyone has the opportunity to pick it up, totally recommend it. It is just like made with such love, and it really does feel like, for the first time in pretty much half a decade, like a real Rare game made by the Rare of old that, you know, people like us grew up loving. And it opens with this really fantastic opening, like, musical number about Rare games, which is kind of poking fun at themselves, you know, in typical Rare fashion, saying that, like, oh, we blew the budget on this musical number and that kind of thing. And it's
That's quite good, actually.
Yeah, you go look it up on YouTube. It's fantastic. Like, it shows you that every time you start the game, and I love it. But yeah, it has. What's really interesting about this game, I think, is that it is so inconsistent in the games it has. Like, you have like absolute gold like Banjo and Conker, and then you have on the other end of the scale, you've got Perfect Dark Zero, and
and like 7 or 8 of their like pre kind of NES games where they're like ZX Spectrum stuff and all this weird, like, super obscure, like, if you try and play those things now, and I watched the Giant Bomb quick look of this, and none of those games look like they would be much fun to me personally, but I don't know, I can kind of understand, you know, they've been around for a very long time, and there's a lot of, you know, game design that comes from that era.
Oh yeah, that's the great thing about Rare Replay, is that it doesn't just feel like an attempt to sell you a bunch of games. It feels like it was made with love, that these are all games handpicked because they truly believe that this is like integral to their history as a company, and this is what shaped them. You know what I mean? And it's not just a bunch of ROMs thrown together. They really think, you know, this is what Rare means, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. Is there any game in the collection that you found yourself gravitating towards and playing more than others?
Probably Conker to begin with, because I haven't played Conker in so many years, and because they never released it on Xbox Live Arcade. The last time it came out was that, like, Live and Reloaded on.
I never heard too many good things about that edition.
I'm surprised that didn't make it in there, actually. But, you know, they've got the original Conker uncensored. It's like up-resed into HD, and I mean, Conker hasn't aged terribly well, to be honest, but it is fantastic to look back on, because that game would never exist if someone tried to make that today by a publisher. They would never get it made, because it's so bizarre and
especially like on a Nintendo platform. The fact that was an N64 game blows my mind. It's kind of crazy.
I know everything about it. It just defies thought, you know. It defies sense that it exists, because it's got such an irreverent, weird, like, very British sense of humor that's incredibly immature and silly. And you have like there's one point where you have to like get a bunch of bees to tickle a lady bee, and then she kind of unveils her boobs like a sunflower, and you have to bounce on her boobs to reach like some money, and it's
insane.
And it's like, what like how is this allowed to happen? Like who let this happen? And yeah, I think that's kind of the part of the magic of Conker, is that it's so weird, and you just think, you know, how did this happen? It's a miracle that this came to be, but you know, it's really good fun, and
it's a crazy juxtaposition as well between like this very cute character who looks very Banjo-like, it, you know, turns out, oh no, we're gonna like throw in Matrix references here, and then you're gonna basically you know, be in World War II, and it's gonna get dark, and they're going to like do a lot of weird stuff.
You really get a sense when you play it that, you know, they just did whatever the hell they wanted, and Nintendo largely sat back and just went, Yeah, okay, but nowadays, if someone tried to make a game like Conker, you know what I mean, with like, as you say, with such a cutesy character, and then have him like going out and he's an alcoholic and
oh yeah, that's the game opens with that, with you like wandering around drunk and throwing up. It's
like that something like that nowadays would get a focus team the hell out of. Like,
oh yeah,
like Nintendo would never go for that. Now they'd be like, well, there's going to be kids wanting to play this because they see the cutesy squirrel and all that, and it would just not be allowed to happen. So, you know, just for how ballsy it is, and yeah, as I say, it's a total miracle that it exists. You have to appreciate it on that level. And another thing is just on a technical level for an N64 game, the cinematics of it are so advanced, and
there's all this voice acting as well.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there are many Nintendo games nowadays that don't have that level of, as I say, like cinematics and voice acting. I can't, like, even on the Wii U, I struggle to think of like games that have that level of as I say, voiceover and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, off the top of my head, The Wonderful 101 has a lot of that kind of thing, but even that, all of Conker's cinematics are very dynamic. There's no you know, they're all like made with like a 3D camera. There's not, it never at any point cheaps out and has like static images come up on the screen or anything like that kind of thing you see nowadays to cut costs. It's all you know, really well made cinematics, you know, for the time.
I think it had to be on a larger N64 cartridge, didn't it, to fit everything in?
Yeah, I think that's right. So you really get the impression that Nintendo just kind of sat back and let it happen, and I think that's great when, you know, when you see a director be able to go a bit crazy like that, which is what I love about Platinum Games, because, you know, they we're kind of segueing into Bayonetta 2 a little bit here, but they're kind of, they let themselves go a bit crazy and just do whatever they want a bit, and I think that's great that there is still a place in the industry that is allowed to happen, you know.
Yeah, it seems like, I think especially with the market today, is everyone is so risk averse, and the AAA space is just like, let's do everything to market to the most people possible so that we can sell the most copies, so that we can get the cash and keep making the same stuff. And it is kind of a miracle that games like Bayonetta 2, Wonderful 101 happen. So yeah, I'm really happy that they exist.
Yeah. I mean, well, Bayonetta 2, to talk about that a little bit, I'll just be quick because I kind of rambled there a little bit. Obviously I played that when it first came out, huge Platinum fan.
Yes, as did I.
And
I was really kind of taken off my feet with it because I had zero interest in Bayonetta 2 before release.
Oh, really?
And then they released the demo onto the eShop, and I was like, I'll give this a go. I'll see how this feels.
And it's like, whoa!
I loved it. I thought it was fucking amazing. Like, the combat in that game has such meat to it, you know? It's you feel so incredible, and the spectacle bites back at you.
Oh,
You get the visual feedback, you get the sound feedback. Like, it is just a tour de force. So yeah, I was completely won over.
Yeah,
it was my favorite game of last year. So
it's so cinematic and crazy and over the top, and it's just beyond words how huge it feels. And it's the same with the Wonderful 101. I'm still kind of torn between the two, which I prefer. I think, you know, just on a very personal level, I think I might prefer the Wonderful 101 a little bit more. That's purely personal. I think, you know, if I broke them down into like very like technical, like,
sure,
I might lean the other way. But yeah, but Bayonetta 2 is fantastic, and I went back and I beat it on normal the first time, and because I normally play on the hard mode, but you don't get that. But I always promise myself I go back and play it on the hard mode, so I did that like about a week ago and just blazed through it on my day off, and oh my god, it's so good. And it's kind of hard to talk about what you unlock, but
I mean, there's lots of Nintendo costumes and things like that.
Like the chain chomp. I think that's not really a spoiler at this point.
No, I've seen that. I mean, that was kind of in marketing materials somewhere or other around the launch.
I think you get that when you beat hard mode and unlock certain things in the shop. You get the chain chomp is so fun, and I love like experimenting with which kind of combinations of weapons and items to have, and the things you unlock when you complete it on hard. I think are worth it. The final difficulty mode is insane. I mean, I'm not even going to go there.
Wait, so you unlock something after you beat hard then?
Yeah, there's like a thing called like climax mode or something. I don't know.
Oh boy.
I think it's called infinite climax.
Right.
Yeah. And
very appropriate to Bayonetta.
Yeah, and you start. You know, I don't think it's really spoiling it, but you start the very first level on the jet, and pretty much the hardest enemies in the game are there already. Like even like the demons from like later on in the game are already attacking you, and you like the gigantic enemies are already on the jet. And I didn't play anything other than the first level, but it must get pretty crazy if that's how it begins.
Yeah, man.
So I'm not even gonna touch that one.
Yeah, I think probably best left alone at that point, full of frustration. Yeah, great. So good to hear about those games. Good stuff in there. I have been playing a Nintendo game that I wanted to get earlier in the year, but I was like, because of reviews and because of what people were saying about it, I was kind of put off. And that game is codenamed Steam.
Oh.
The other day, someone tweeted out, I think it's Games Asylum, who sometimes tweets out, offers and deals on certain products, and they were like, "Oh, codename Steam is £11.20 on Amazon." I was like, "Wow, okay."
Really?
That dropped very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's not selling well at all, and they are trying to get rid of copies because that's kind of crazy that it's already
it's
that
dropped
low.
even lower now, hasn't it?
Yeah, and here's the crazy thing. Bali and I went to an event in London called Hyper Japan where they had some of Nintendo's E3 stuff, and we played all that stuff there.
Yeah.
Nintendo was selling codename Steam there for £17.50, half price off, at a Nintendo event.
Really?
And we were like, what? That's not a good sign, is it? When Nintendo themselves are selling this at a massive discount?
That's really unusual. I mean, it really must have tanked. I didn't know. I didn't realize it. I got the impression it had done terribly well, but
no,
that is quite a come down.
How
long has it been out now?
It came out, I think, in the UK in May. I think it was March for America.
Wow. Wow.
But it was May for here, and yeah, already is being heavily discounted. I think there's probably quite a lot of reasons for that, and one of them is it didn't get great reviews. There's a lot of issues with the game, but it doesn't have much brand recognition yet. It's a completely brand new IP from Nintendo, and I think lots of people weren't willing to take a punt on it, which is unfortunate. I think.
And remember when like a game? Sorry, I was just going to say. Remember when the game like Fire Emblem launched in the UK? They'd already had Roy and Marth in Smash Brothers.
Right, they had kind of a primer.
Really impressive sort of marketing to kind of warm people up to certain characters and think, oh, let's play their game when that comes. And these
gotta get that Abraham Lincoln DLC in Smash.
Yeah. How about that? Let's get him thrown in there. That would help matters out. So absolutely, there are a lot of reasons why people didn't pick it up. But what I played of the demo, I really enjoyed. Bali and I both talked about it, back when that demo dropped, and we both were pretty positive on it. But when reviews hit, people were like, "Wow, this game gets bullshit and frustrating and really difficult." And also there was the issue of the enemy turns and how they were very slow and you couldn't speed them up. Unfortunately, by the time the game was released in the UK, they'd fixed that issue because if you had a standard 3DS, it was ×2 speed for the enemy turns, and then if you had a new 3DS, it was ×3. So I don't have to deal with any of that, fortunately. I have ×2 speed because I just have a standard 3DS XL. So yeah, that's one thing I guess is kind of out the way. That enemy turns still take a bit of time, but it's certainly not the agonizing wait that it was before, which I'm appreciative of. But I'm really, really enjoying this game so far. I'm so glad that I played it. I'm not super far in. I'm maybe 4 missions through it, and I've got a full squad now, so I have 4 team members that I can rotate between. And there are certain elements which, yes, they are frustrating and they are annoying, but the base mechanics of the game for me are so satisfying that I can kind of overlook them somewhat. It's definitely a flawed gem, but the whole idea of not knowing where the enemies are and having to kind of be very methodical and slow and, you know, plan out your moves and make sure you have enough steam left for a certain enemy if they're coming towards you, all that stuff it just feels good to play. It's a strategy game, but you have more kind of direct control over your units.
Yeah. So I haven't played it. Like you say, you can't see the enemies. Is that like a fog of war thing?
Well, basically, I think Intelligent Systems said that the idea behind it was they wanted to create more of like a third-person shooter, but with a strategy game.
Right. So are people in cover in that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the aliens are all kind of obscured behind the environment, and there are boxes and cover and all this stuff placed around, so you never really know where they are, and I think that's part of why people are really annoyed by the turn-taking thing, because you literally are just looking at nothing while the aliens move, and maybe once and again you'll get like a quick snapshot of like, oh, that guy moved from there to there, so I have a bit of knowledge. But for the most part, yeah, they're just kind of doing their own thing in the background, and at the very start of maps there's obviously a ton of aliens, so it takes forever and ever. So yeah, I can totally understand where people are coming from there, but yeah, it's so far it's really doing it for me. There's sometimes there are enemies which will pop up which are like eyeballs, and if they see you, then, you know, they're going to alert the other enemies and they'll come swarming towards you. And the problem is, if you shoot the eyeball, it just kind of disappears and then goes a little bit further away. And sometimes you'll be in a situation where it's like, okay, I have like 3 shots here. I really want to use them on the enemy, but this eyeball is just sitting around being a pain in the ass. I'm going to shoot it. And then you shoot it once and it can still see you. And you shoot it another time, it can still see you. And then you shoot it a third time, finally it disappears, but now you've wasted all your shots and there's an enemy in front of you. So it's kind of like, you know, a risk-reward thing, like, where do I focus? What am I supposed to, you know, be prioritizing here? And what I discovered is, really in Codename Steam, you shouldn't worry too much about killing every alien. Like, obviously it's great to clear a path, but when they start respawning behind you and when there's loads kind of that you can't deal with, you just need to neck it to the goal. And it's all kind of about survival and getting to the end, you know, which I didn't kind of think about the first time I was playing it, and it's kind of sunk in now, which... yeah,
and that's a very different system to something like Fire Emblem or Advance Wars, isn't it? I mean, obviously both those games, I believe, have spawning behind you, and particularly Fire Emblem. But
oh boy, yeah,
there's a limit to how many waves are coming, and also the waves that are coming don't usually dictate what you're doing. They're usually just sort of a nuisance on the side, I found.
Yeah,
they're not sort of Fire like Emblem... the main. They're not the main impact of the enemies on the board, essentially. And if I felt like, and because I've only played the demo, but I felt like you said, just constant waves would just keep coming. And again, like you said, it's about just getting through the course rather than clearing the map.
Yeah, you don't get any experience or anything for killing enemies. I mean, you get cash, which you can then use to spend on things, but it's kind of minimal, the amount that you get from taking an enemy down, so it's like, yeah, it's not really worth it in many senses. And also Codename Steam, like, you have a max party of 4, whereas in something like Fire Emblem you have like 12 to 15 units that you can, you know, distribute around the field and have them all do different things. Whereas this, you kind of have to stick as a unit a lot of the time. If one person is out on their own, oh boy, not good at all. They are kind of almost dead before they begin, in many senses. But yeah, I mean, there's so many cool things about it. I like the way that the cutscenes are done, and we've kind of had a little bit of talk about voice acting in Nintendo games. The voice acting is pretty good here. It's nothing to write home about, but it fits what they're going for with their kind of comic book-esque, you know, panels that they go between, and you know, the artistic style they've gone for, which gives me hope, I guess, for maybe if they were to do voice acting in Zelda, that they would pitch the tone correctly and you know, make it work.
Doesn't Will Wheaton play like Abraham Lincoln or something?
Yeah, I think he's one of the characters. I can't remember which one, but he is in this game, and yeah, the voice acting is good across the board. So it's nice that Nintendo are actually going to people who are known for doing voice acting. You know, I don't expect Zelda to have Troy Baker in it, but you never know. Maybe
he's the next Link.
Yes, jeez, man, that would be weird.
That would be terrible.
That would be really weird. Troy Baker as Link.
Tara Strong as Zelda.
Yeah, that, you know, it could work. Who knows? Maybe one day. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I expect at some point to get super fucking annoyed and to throw it out the window because I feel like it's creeping up on doing that.
I predict a falling out.
Have you tried the amiibo stuff?
So interesting you say that. I can't try it at the moment because I don't believe the amiibo thing for the 3DS XL is out. The little disc thing, right?
Oh, right.
Did you realise this was going to be an issue when you bought Lucina?
I kind of didn't. So at the same time that I bought Codename Steam, I saw the Lucina amiibo was on Amazon as well, and I was like, oh my god, because Lucina is my main character in Smash, and she's like one of my favourite game characters. I really love Fire Emblem Awakening, and so I was like, okay, this is like my last amiibo. This is the last one I'm going to get, and it was a really good price. Yeah, I say that now. It was a really good price. It was basically the same price as Codename Steam, like 11 quid. So I was like, fuck it, I'm getting Lucina as well. That means that like I'll be able to use her in Mario Maker probably for a costume. I'll be able to use her in Codename Steam and in Smash, and loads of functions happening here. And also Fire Emblem Fates, which comes out next year. If you have an amiibo, you can recruit that character. So I'd be able to have Lucina as part of my army in that game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really cool.
I did not know that. Okay.
Would you like to borrow my new 3DS for a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. I will, so that I can add her to my collection. So yeah, it's weird that the Fire Emblem amiibo of all the amiibo have kind of got the most value, which I didn't expect whatsoever. That's kind
I think they've got the most value on eBay as well, don't they?
Oh yeah, absolutely, they do. That's everyone's selling those characters. But Lucina in Codename Steam, I believe, is supposed to be a ranged unit because she has a crossbow equipped to her, which is it's way more useful than the other guys because they are just like sword users and they would basically get mown down in this game because everyone else has like a gun or a ranged attack. So she would have been great, but I haven't got to try her yet. So Bally, come around, bring a 3DS, new 3DS, and I'll give that a whirl and we'll try her out. Yeah, so that is pretty much it. That's what I've been playing. I hope to continue with Codename Steam, and we'll talk about it more in the future. But that is going to close out this first segment. But don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break with some of your emails. See you in a bit.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. It's that time again, it's time for your email. So we've got a couple lined up to discuss. But before we get into that, let me remind you that we are always needing more emails. So if you have some question or thought or comment that you would like to share with us, we'd greatly appreciate it if you send it to the email address ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. So, our first question is from our good friend Nagi. So, in relation to your previous podcast discussing Chris Pranger's termination from Nintendo's Treehouse team, now that he's not a part of Nintendo anymore, don't you think that he has the freedom and clear choice to possibly just open the floodgates on Nintendo's inner workings and literally just reveal every single practice and reasoning of Nintendo and its Treehouse team, whether extremely questionable or positive as a company? I feel as if he's gone this far with the immense amount of info on his appearance on the podcast he was on, and I can guarantee people are craving more, because I feel as if everything he said in that 100-minute podcast is only the tip of the iceberg of how Nintendo works.
Well, it's an interesting discussion point. I thought it would work particularly well because we have Liam on here who knows some inside workings of how companies deal with stuff like this.
Yeah, I'll take this one a bit if you
Sure.
want. So, I mean, well, first of all, you have to look at it from the point of view of Chris Pranger.
Right.
He has no kind of grievance with Nintendo. If you read his posts, he's he's very humble, and he accepts that he made a mistake in going a little too far on what he said. And
yeah, he seems very regretful in that Facebook thing that he put up.
Oh yeah, he seems absolutely devastated, and it was his dream job. And you can tell he still has a lot of respect for Nintendo, because he still tweets about Nintendo all the time, and I'm sure he still loves them, and he's still playing their games and talking about buying them. So, on a very personal level, I don't think he has any grievances with the company to do that.
Right. Yeah.
And that mainly, if he did this publicly, he would get sued up the arse.
Right.
I mean. But if he did it anonymously, then people wouldn't really believe him, unless he went to I don't know, me or
Sure.
or yeah. But he wouldn't do that. And another thing, to explain why he would get sued. I mean, I'm sure he signed NDAs when he was at Nintendo to say he couldn't talk ever about the internal workings and that kind of thing. But one thing that people don't really know about working at NOA and companies like Western American-owned studios and that kind of thing is that when you leave, or whether your contract is terminated or whatever, to receive your severance pay, you always have to sign an NDA, or otherwise they reserve the right just to refuse you that.
Yeah.
You just don't get paid unless you sign whatever, you agree to whatever terms they have of the NDA. So yeah, so he's he can't say anything on the record, at least.
Right, I think it's very interesting as well, timing-wise, with all the stuff that's happened with Konami and Hideo Kojima, and maybe one day that story will be told, but when Kojima leaves Konami, inevitably, he will have to have signed things which say, you cannot say shit about what went on inside here, and...
I don't know. Kojima is a pretty rich guy. He will have only signed those things if there was some kind of prior contract to do that, or... If he signed an NDA as he leaves, I could see him not doing that and refusing it, because
interesting.
I'm sure the guy has enough money already, and
right. I mean, he has the name recognition to kind of go anywhere he wants.
Yeah, I mean, point. I don't know why he would agree to Konami's terms. I'm sure he is limited to what he would say, and maybe he just doesn't want to talk about that stuff. But yeah, I think maybe one day that story could be told, but it would just be maybe 5 or 10 years down the line.
Right, you kind of feel one day he may write a book or something on that, and it will all come to light.
Yeah, what do you think the legal things would be in relation to a book on something like that? Do you think all these contracts are time unlimited, or
it generally says something like the indefinite future or something, until until the company alters its policies in some major way or that kind of thing. I was speaking to Mike Wakan, who was one of the, I think he was the producer or something, or one of the main kind of people on the original Metroid Prime, and I'm like, can you tell me when I just wanted a very basic bit of information, when around in development did Nintendo change it from third person to first person. He's like, yeah, sorry, I can't say anything because I'm still it's been 15 years and he still can't give out basic information like that. So I
guess it would be highly relevant for Metroid Prime 4 coming out next year, and he doesn't want to reveal it, but I don't know. Yeah,
so it does last a long time.
It's very interesting, because I was going to mention write a book, and now two things I want to say. First of all, I think for a future employer, they might feel uncomfortable about employing someone who fell out so dramatically if he did write a book or something.
Right, I was going to say the exact same thing, is if you want to get another job, going blabbing secrets about your previous employer is a good way to not get another job.
And like you said, Liam, everything he's written after being laid off suggests he has nothing against Nintendo. He's a massive Nintendo fan. He still believes in the company. So that's kind of unrealistic. And then, like we were saying about writing a book, if you like, I'm very into my politics. So when someone serves in the government, obviously you're not working for a company, so you're not signing contracts in the same way in terms of hiding things, unless it's obviously to do with Secret Service or something,
Right.
as in MI5, MI6. But I think that, say, an ex-politician, they would always leave it right until the end of their career, where they've got their pension, they've made their money, they've had their career, they've got nothing to lose, and then they just want to make a bit of money from an interesting book. And loads of sort of ex-politicians do that. So you're right. He's very young, and you have to make sure that you can get the food on the table, get the next job, have a career before there's any idea of taking on a company like Nintendo, so I don't think it would be a good idea for numerous reasons.
Yeah, exactly. As far as I know, he's still unemployed, so I mean that would be the worst possible thing for him to do right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be a terrible thing.
I mean, the only way it would work is if A, he wouldn't get sued, which he would, and B, if he had fallen out with Nintendo, and C, he'd be able to make enough money from a book quickly, which is very hard to do, even with a book that I'm sure would be under high demand amongst the gaming community, like something that explains the inner workings of NOA.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a sad thing that happened to him, really. But again, I don't know, we talked a lot about this last week, but yeah, don't go on podcasts, I guess, if you work at a major corporation. Probably a bad call.
Or if you do, don't talk about them.
Yeah. And actually, I think he had been on other podcasts before, but they just hadn't got traction, right? Like, he had appeared on something else, I think. But this is the one that people picked up and blew up on NeoGAF, and people just started talking about. So
that makes sense, actually, that you say that, because if you've already been on podcasts saying similar things, by that point you're probably like, oh, it's fine, I'll just say the same thing again, and then it just kind of took hold by a couple of articles and became wider knowledge. So yeah, he might have just got caught out.
Yeah, from what I understand, he did podcasts like years ago, like about 4 years ago was around the time when he kind of stopped. And I think back then social media wasn't quite as big as it is now, and nowadays you have all of these different like Nintendo feed things picking up on these things, like
Yes.
Go Nintendo and Nintendo everything, and everything is blown up to such a proportion now that it's hard to hide these things. It's hard for these things to go unnoticed and slip under the radar.
Yeah, and it's become just a much bigger platform. So
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. But I still stand by. It's one of the most interesting 90 minutes that you can listen to. So
yeah, if you haven't listened to it yet,
you should probably
really
still go do that.
give it a go.
A lot of good insights there.
So our next question is from another good friend of ours, John from the Nintendo Show. Hey guys, you wanted mail, you got it. What was the console or handheld that it got you interested in games you never considered playing? For example, before I owned a GameCube, I played Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, and Final Fantasy almost exclusively. It was the GameCube, primarily the small library and more available funds, that turned my attention toward games in other franchises and genres. Do you guys have a similar sort of awakening to other types of games, or have you always had diverse tastes? John from the Nintendo Show.
Yeah, he doesn't work at Nintendo. The
Don't think
Nintendo
so.
Show, no. So I feel like for me, it was probably when I got my PlayStation 3 that I started branching out into other genres, and that wasn't necessarily by my own cognizance. It was more the fact that the genres that were available on that system were genres that really didn't exist on Nintendo platforms, and up to that point I had only owned a PS1 as a non-Nintendo platform, so I'd been a Nintendo guy the whole time, and I got my PS3 and I'm starting to play Uncharted, I'm starting to play Final Fantasy 13 and Infamous, and like these open world Western games that I'd never kind of exposed myself to before, and before that I was very much you're straight down the line. I'll play Pokemon, I'll play Zelda, I'll play Mario, and not too much in between. But the PS3 was the one that I guess forced me down another avenue because the experiences that you get on Nintendo aren't really available there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I got my start in diversifying my taste, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was like a similar thing for me with like the Xbox and the PS2 kind of. I'd always been like a Sega and Nintendo kid growing up, and I'd never really dipped my toe in the PlayStation pond very much. I mean, I like around friends' houses and that kind of thing, and then really like Halo 2 online and that kind of thing, and that just kind of like opened me up to like a whole new world of things, because Nintendo really didn't embrace online until very recently. So
right, yeah.
So I mean, like online shooters and that kind of thing weren't really a thing that you had on Nintendo platforms until like semi recently, with like there's bad examples, but like GoldenEye, Wii, and the Conduit and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed GoldenEye Wii for what it was. I think it's a pretty good game. But totally, it's funny because in the Wii era, everyone expected, oh man, Nintendo have the perfect setup for a shooter here with these pointer controls, right? And there was always the expectation that there was going to be like a breakout hit, a breakout shooter, and it kind of never happened, which is unfortunate. But yeah, loads of interesting stuff. And I guess, obviously, way more recently, Splatoon is their shooter, and they've done really well with that. It's gone much better than I think a lot of people expected. So, yeah. Bally?
Well, I'm sure most listeners know this, but for those who don't, I only have ever owned and currently own Nintendo consoles.
Fanboy!
So I am the fanboy. I plead guilty.
Yeah.
But I would argue that definitely in the last couple of years, and since doing the podcast, I've definitely pushed and tried to play games that are outside of my comfort zone. And like yourself, MBZ, I very much started on Mario, Zelda, Pokemon. Those were the only games I owned, and there were loads of Nintendo franchises back in the day that I just never tried, that in the last few years I've just kind of really gotten into, like Metroid, for example. I'd never really played a first-person game, let alone a first-person shooting style game, although that's controversial. So I've kind of tried to expand my horizons by playing games like Assassin's Creed 4. I've now played a wealth of indie games, although a lot of them are similar in many ways. A lot of them are quite 2D platformery.
Right.
So Fire Emblem's another one that I had never experienced before. So I'm very guilty of trying new experiences under the Nintendo console umbrella.
Yeah.
But
I think you're very well catered for on Nintendo platforms in terms of diversity.
Yeah.
Whereas on the other platforms, although there are lots of different types of games, you're less inundated with like 3D platformers and that kind of thing. Where they all have like different flavors of variety, but on Nintendo platforms, I find there's more kind of like, on one scale you have like Bayonetta 2, and then the other side you've got Pokemon and Mario, and so I think on Nintendo things there's enough variety to justify just owning one. But like in my experience, I think you'd be really doing yourself a lot of good to just buy like an Xbox 360 or a PS3 on the cheap and like catch up on like The Last of Us and stuff, because like you're missing out on like most of the big kind of blockbuster games.
I mean, I have plans to borrow a friend's PS3, and he has set aside a number of games, including Grand Theft Auto, the Batman Arkham games, and things like that. So just really great games that I have definitely missed out on. The Uncharted series I would love to try. So you're right, there are definitely just key seminal experiences that I've missed that I definitely need to play. But I do agree with you, obviously being a Nintendo fanboy, that you do get a nice variety owning Nintendo systems. And that's the great thing about Nintendo, is that they have their platformer, they have their online racing game, they now have their online shooting game, they have their online fighting game. They have all these different genres under one umbrella, and they sort of say, here are a nice friendly characters that'll link it all together, especially a game like Smash Brothers, obviously, that creates this Nintendo universe, and then within that they have your strategy RPG, you have your turn-based, your real-time strategy, arguably, with something like Pikmin. So they really cover a lot of bases, and that's ultimately the main reason I'm a Nintendo fan.
Yeah,
Cool.
they do you well. Just as a side tangent, what genres do you usually gravitate towards, Liam? Are you a guy who likes open world stuff? Are you a shooter fan, or?
I mean, this is a very kind of general answer, but I tend to gravitate towards more kind of like action games.
Yeah.
Like I say, Bayonetta and 3D platformers and Zelda and that kind of thing. I think I have very diverse tastes.
Yeah.
To be honest, like I try to play as much of everything as I can, and I mean, with what little time I have to play games nowadays, right. I mean, I go from like playing Batman, Arkham, what do you call it, Arkham Knight, one day to what do you call it, Kirby Rainbow Paintbrush, or whatever the next one.
The one that Bally has very much trouble remembering the name of.
What is it called?
It's the okay.
No.
It's the Rainbow Paintbrush in Europe and the UK.
Right.
In America, it's Rainbow Curse because it was originally Canvas Curse, whereas here it was Power Paintbrush. That's another thing that really just annoys me so much is the name differences between US and UK games, and things like Pushmo, which here are called pull blocks. I never refer to it as pull blocks, and partially because I'm so entrenched in American media and those guys always talking about it and referring to it as Pushmo. So when I talk about it, I'll say Pushmo without second thought, and not refer to the other version.
It's like how with Yoshi's Woolly World, I always call it Yon Yoshi because I just can't get over that. I always call it Yon Yoshi, and people sometimes don't know what I'm talking about exactly.
It's kind of crazy to insinuate that you don't know what you're talking about when you're saying Yon Yoshi. Is very self-explanatory, but I get you.
Another side tangent. Sorry, just to go back. I would also say a really cool thing that the podcast has allowed me to do as a gamer is definitely MBZ. You will recommend games that I must try, that I have access to, and I've played so many games on the show that you've recommended me that I've thoroughly enjoyed and that have broadened my horizons, and I'm trying to push back. I'm trying to broaden your horizons with a couple of games as well that I'm going to force down your throat the next few months. But it's just a really good two-way thing of saying, I played this game, you should try it. I played this game, you should try it. And just that also helps when you're speaking to other people about what they enjoy, and that's ultimately what Twitter and the internet is just so good at, is just access to other people's thoughts on games that you don't know about.
Absolutely. It really it makes it like, if you don't have many friends who play games and you don't have access to a conversation like that regularly, the internet has just allowed people to get a variety of opinions from a variety of different places, and it's great for that sometimes, and also people sometimes don't understand that, hey, opinions are opinions, and you should probably respect that. But, it's how it goes sometimes. I don't know. I think for me, like, diversifying my taste has been something I've actively tried to do in recent years, and I think Patrick Klepek was the one who inspired me to do so. He always talked about how he would try something from a genre that he'd never played before, and all of a sudden it would become like one of his favorite things. And I thought, that's probably a cool thing to do. And like last year I'd never really played a first person shooter before, and I played Titanfall, and I fucking loved it. It was fantastic. I know lots of people didn't kind of talk about it in Game of the Year discussions and everything. Everyone kind of had fallen off it, but I thought it was amazing. I thought it was really fun.
I thought like mechanically it was really tight. I mean, I just thought it lacked content a little bit. But eventually it got it's a really fun game. I really need to go back and play that.
Yeah, I think the problem now is trying to find a game would be tough.
They'll bring out another one soon enough.
Exactly, yeah, and we'll wait for that and hopefully get a second one. But and that really kind of brought me into shooters, and it has helped me a great deal. And I played a bit of Hearthstone, which made me kind of open my eyes to like the card game world a little bit, and yeah, it's good to have context for that stuff. And I think a lot of the times when I'm listening to other people talk about games that I've maybe not played, I don't have the context, and thus I don't really enjoy the discussion as much. So I'm always trying to, push myself to play something else and get out there.
And that's ultimately what we try to do with this podcast, isn't it?
Yes.
We talk about games we've played, hopefully give positive opinions, and then people listening hopefully will occasionally think, oh, that sounds really cool, I must try that out. And we've had so many great emails in from people saying, oh, you recommended this game, I tried it out, absolutely loved it, thanks for telling me about it, or something. And that's that's perfect. That's symmetry. That's just the perfect way a podcast, especially in relation to gaming, should work, which is really great.
All right. Well, good questions there. Thank you for sending those in. We will, of course, be answering some more of those in our next episode, and you can send them to an email address. And where is that, Bally? Remind people again.
The email address is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Indeed. So stick with us. After the break, we will be coming back to talk about unreleased video games and the mysteries they hold. So do not go anywhere. We'll be right back. Alright everyone, welcome back to the third and final segment of our show. This week we are making great use of our fantastic guest by talking about all the work that he does with games that have not been released and all that good stuff. So I think I just want to open up, Liam, and ask you, how did you get into doing all this stuff? How did you start working with Unseen64 and getting into revealing games and all that stuff?
Well, I guess it kind of started, it would have started around like 2008 or something. Console games is not something that you kind of come out of the womb knowing about, if you know what I mean.
Right, yeah.
It's something that you learn about, like, once you're very into games and you don't realize the kind of the development cycles and that kind of thing. And how I came to, learn about console games and that kind of thing, was, just like looking years ago through magazines and seeing games in like magazine previews and remembering, oh, what happened to that? And that kind of, the curiosity at the back of your mind of what happened to Donkey Kong Racing or something like that.
Right, that's a big one actually, because
Yeah.
I do remember in a Nintendo magazine I saw screenshots for that and all these underwater things happening, and then like nothing happened, and it just disappeared and never thought about it.
Yeah, I'm sure it is the same kind of process that a lot of people go through. You think, oh, well, what happened to these games? I want to find out what happened. So I don't know, I must have Googled one day and come across Unseen64, and I just spent hours sifting through the archive and looking at all these games and thinking, oh yeah, I remember this. And sometimes they'd have the answers about what happened to them, and sometimes they'd just have more media on them than I'd seen in the past. And it's just I found it to be a really interesting archive to look through, and I thought they're doing well, but they could use some help. So I decided that I'd chip in a little bit and do a little bit of editing for them. And then I took a break for several years, and I started doing like kind of professional writing for a couple of small sites, just doing little bits of freelancing just to earn a bit of pocket money while I was studying. And then I kind of built up a modest kind of base of contacts in the games industry and stuff, and made a couple of good friends. And I just decided, I should go back to Unseen64 and start doing that again. So about a year or two ago, I decided, yeah, I'll really get back into it. And that's kind of when my kind of passion for uncovering this stuff kind of ignited. And people started to kind of sit up and notice me, I guess.
Yeah, it really does seem like in the last couple of years you have just, dived full, head on into uncovering stuff, and a lot of it just keeps popping up in the news. And I remember, watching Colin and Greg live, and they were talking about like one of your stories, and I was like, this is really cool, So yeah, it's I guess a lot of good feelings you get from unveiling stuff like this.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not about getting appreciation or whatever. All I really want to do is just kind of find out what I can and preserve that information for future generations in an archive like Unseen64. So like in 5 or 10 years time, new players can look back and say, there was this, I don't know, cancelled Halo, or I don't know, or Super Mario Spikers or whatever. Or they can look up games that they're wondering about too, hopefully.
Do you think there's a lack of, rivals to the sort of thing you do, in the sense of almost investigative video game related journalism? Do you think there's not enough people out there? Because it's not really something that I personally see a ton of on the internet.
No, I've spoken about this with like many different sites, because a lot of sites have tried to kind of pick me up and get me on board as a staffer and that kind of thing.
Sure they will.
and try to get in on the stories and that kind of thing. And so I've talked to people about why is it the case. I mean, I kind of agree with what you're saying, and I kind of talk to sites like Nintendo Everything and their kind of reasoning is they don't have the time to do that, because they're too busy reporting on all of the other news that's current and going on, so they can't.
It's quite fast paced, isn't it?
Yeah, and just it's a problem of time, and that most people don't know how to do it, because you have to kind of know how to push the right buttons, how to track people down, how to use the resources at your disposal to really find your man and get that information.
So on that point then, how does it usually work with you? Are you finding that it's more often that developers will come to you and say, hey, I have this bit of information on this game that was never released. Do you want to, help release this? Or are you more chasing people down and trying to find stuff out yourself?
It's much more me chasing them. I wish it was the other way on. It's something,
right, yeah.
Sometimes it is just that. Sometimes I get incredibly lucky. I'm incredibly fortunate to have like a developer from NST come forward and say, I saw this thing you did. I know a bunch of other things, and then I can, learn about that, and that's fantastic when that happens. But it's mostly me going through the internet Wayback Machine to find. To find developer portfolios that have been ripped down, and that kind of thing. Like things that. Developers will put up things on their portfolios, like graphic artists and animators and that kind of thing, and publishers will rip that stuff down. And sometimes you can get it and get that stuff, but or sometimes it just stays up. That's generally how that works. You get lucky and you run a lot of things through Google and you find someone, and there's a lot of use of the internet Wayback Machine to find stuff that's been ripped down and that kind of thing. And then I email that person and I kind of explain, it's a lot about pushing the right buttons. When I started this, a lot of people didn't reply, and I kind of got wise that, I don't want to say that I'm a reporter. I just say that I'm someone researching this, and then, get friendly with them, because they're people, and you don't, if anyone wants to do this, never like straightforward be like, I'm trying to be a journalist and I want to, because that immediately sets off alarm bells, and they're just nope, not doing this, I'm going to get sued, something bad's going to happen. So you just got to approach them as a person who's curious and just say, can I ask you about this? And then sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, but a lot of the time it is knocking down a lot of doors before you get the person who will talk. It is a very time-consuming process, and most of the time is spent finding that person, but it's really great eventually when you do finally find someone, and that is kind of how it works. I mean, it's getting more common nowadays that someone will come to me. But when that happens, I'm very careful because I always make sure they're who they say they are. Because
it's very easy, the internet these days, for people to just parade around as someone else.
Yeah, so I think some people get the impression that I just post stuff that Anon send me, and that's not the case. I vet them out very thoroughly before I say anything, and I'm very thorough about what I do, and but
do you ever get much sort of hit back from anyone when you're approaching them as someone who has an interest in this sort of thing, and then it does end up in one of your videos or an article on a website or something? Is there much tension there, or is it just like, oh well, that's fair, because I gave him that, and the source is obviously never revealed?
It's happened a couple of times, but I try to be as clear as I can that I say I don't open that with that I'm looking to report on this, because a lot of the time I just want to discover a bit of information, and then maybe one day in the future we'll release that. Is how it works, once we can clear the legal side of things. It rarely happens that there is tension there, but one example, for instance, was really when I first started doing this. I was pretty clear to this guy that after we spoke initially, I was like, well, I'd like to share this stuff on a website at some point in the future, if that's okay. And the guy was like, yeah, that's fine, this is to do with Mario Spikers. And I was like, he was like, is that okay? He's like, yeah, that's no problem. And I think he just didn't realize what an impact that was going to have, because I set that to be scheduled for Friday morning or something, and I woke up and I thought, oh, maybe it's Go Nintendo will have picked this up, and it's on. I wake up and I slept in a bit, and it's on the front page of IGN, and then a couple of days later, I get an email from this guy, very angry, like, well, the shit really hit the fan there, didn't it? and really, that was pretty much what he said. He was really upset about saying I could get sued, and I was just I didn't reply, but I was just not sympathetic to his plight at that point, because I mean, if you were under some kind of contract not to say this, and you didn't want me to post this, you should have said, because I was clear enough, and I tried to be. Yeah, I tried to be forthcoming. That's all you can
do, isn't it? Yeah.
I tried to be forthcoming about my intentions to post this stuff, and but it's only really happened twice. I'd say that
that's a pretty good record then, isn't it? Considering.
Yeah. Another bad thing that happened was with Crytek. I posted a video of a prototype, because I don't know if you know anything about the development of Rise. It was originally a first-person game.
Wasn't it a Kinect game at some point?
Yes, at one point it became a Kinect game, and they were experimenting with traditional button controls as well. And I released a video of this first-person prototype that Crytek worked on. I believe when it was still their Budapest team making it, and they got very upset about that for some reason. Initially they were all totally fine about it, and then I popped it on N4G and it blew up, and Crytek shit the bed and pulled the video from YouTube and sent me an angry email and all of this stuff, and I was just like, well, what did you think was going to happen, to be honest? But I try to be forthcoming.
I think it's interesting that you're saying you're going after these stories much more than people are coming to you, because in my head I'm imagining a developer or some artist who's worked on a project for 3 years, and all of a sudden it gets cancelled, and then all their work they've done has just gone to nothing, and you imagine that they want that out there. They want people to see look, I put time into this, and I worked on this, and I have a lot of passion for this. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of complicated. Sometimes that does happen, but generally it just goes to Unseen 64 in general.
Yeah,
but that is still rare that happens. What you're saying about them wanting to show what they did, they still generally get to do that. They sometimes sometimes the companies permit them to put that stuff on their portfolios. You know what I mean? Like their online stuff, and then they can show that to their next job partners or whatever.
And this is the sort of stuff you're coming across using the Wayback Machine, right? Is going through these portfolios and finding these pieces of art and all that
and there's still a lot of stuff just online that hasn't been taken down, that was used with permission of the publishers or whatever, and then we can just using clever keywords and dates and that kind of thing, we can narrow it down and find that stuff and then put it on Unseen 64 with their permission.
Interesting. So I was then kind of wondering, like, how long is it usually, like, I'm sure it varies a lot, but when you're working on a project, how much time do you usually spend, like, collating information before you think, okay, now I have enough to go forward with this, and this is kind of substantial enough that I can write a piece or make a video about this and kind of release it to the public?
As you say, it like varies a lot, you know?
Yeah.
I released a story in February or something, or I don't really remember. I don't recall, to be honest, exactly when it was, but there was this story about Nintendo trying to buy the Harry Potter license from
Yes, I remember this one.
From J.K. Rowling, and the turnaround on that was incredibly quick. We used our I was kind of just trolling through Google one day and found a mention of this on an artist's resume or something, and I shared this with the other guys at Unseen 64. I was like, "Guy, what the hell is he talking about? Like some kind of Nintendo Harry Potter thing?" And we just thought it was some kind of like cancelled Harry Potter game for a Nintendo system. And then I wrote to this person, and he was like, "Oh yeah, Nintendo tried to buy Harry Potter in the 90s," and this guy gave us everything in over the course of a day, and by the end of the second day, I had like a timeline of everything that happened, and it was ready to go. I think we found it on a Saturday night and we posted it on the Monday, so that is that is how quick it can be. And he gave us like multiple sources to back up what he was saying, and he had the images, like the concept art, to prove that it wasn't just a load of hooey. And it was definitely someone who worked at NST, and whereas there are things that can take months. It generally takes months, I'd say. With the project,
emails back and forth and things.
There's a lot of dead ends. There's a lot of people stop replying, people getting busy with their jobs and then emailing back in a couple of months' time, and you just have to wait it out a lot of the time. And with Project Hammer, I'd say I kind of cracked that one fairly quickly. With Kid Icarus is the kind of current project I'm working on. The two big things I'm working on right now are a Wave Race game and a Kid Icarus game.
Oh wow, Wave Race!
Piqued Bally's interest.
The Wave Race one isn't too far away.
Cool.
I think I know when I'll be able to. Yeah, it shouldn't be too long, I'd say. But the Kid Icarus thing is kind of my main focus, and I had been trying to do that one for on and off for years. Like every so often, every year I'd take another crack at it and find nothing on Google or whatever, because there's no. It was very top secret and there's no references to it on any portfolios. And then, very recently, I went through a game which belonged to the company which is alleged to have worked on it, and I went through the credits of every person mentioned around the time at which this game was alleged to be in development, and I lifted every member of the team onto a Word document or something, and I just went through every person. I emailed them, "Do you know anything about this? Do you know anything about this?" And after about maybe it's about 10 or 20 people, someone finally was like, "Oh yeah, I'll tell you everything." And then that's sometimes how it goes. Wow. And then they give you more sources and that kind of thing. But Kid Icarus took kind of years, I guess, to really get anything concrete on. Not years of constant trying, but
but it was always in the background.
I suppose actively I've been working on Kid Icarus kind of fairly actively since about I'd say April or something like that. So
Kid Icarus is interesting because I do always remember the folks over at IGN kept saying there's a Kid Icarus thing that's probably going to happen
on Wii U, right?
On Wii at that time.
Oh, Wii.
I'm going to reference that in my video when I eventually...
Oh, really? With Matt Casamassina and all those guys?
Yeah, I'd like to get a quote from Matt. Matt isn't online a lot nowadays. I think Matt's let on that he knew more than he did, because the things he says doesn't line up with anything I know about it.
Interesting.
He makes out that it was something that was pretty much nearly done or whatever, and that it was gonna get announced at E3 and and that kind of thing. It's not. It wasn't that far along. It was being worked on for longer than I initially thought it would be. But I mean, yeah, you'll see soon enough. But I think he kind of got a bit carried away with himself with that one, maybe. Or maybe he was fed some misinformation. But what IGN said about it is largely untrue, I'd say. Yeah. Not to call them out, I guess, but...
No, of course not.
Taking on the giants.
Yeah. You mentioned Project Hammer then. That is one that is of great interest to me because it was kind of the time that I started really following the games industry, was back around that E3 when the Wii was being announced and everything, and this game was shown and people had played demos of it on the floor, and then it just kind of disappeared out of nowhere. And the story behind that one is really fascinating, but it's also kind of saddening, and sometimes of course you'll have to report on things that kind of paint companies in a bad light, and I'm sure that's never a lovely thing to do, but how did that come together?
Well, just kind of like how I said, going through various resumes and portfolios and searching the right words until I eventually found someone who would talk about it, because there are a fair amount of people who have Project Hammer on their resumes and stuff, but there's really not a lot. There is nothing really substantial on there. There's just a couple of images, and they just kind of mention, oh yeah, between this year, I was working on it in 2000 and whatever, and so it was a matter of finding someone who hadn't signed an NDA. And I might be able to get him to speak out publicly about this stuff, so it will further back up what I'm saying.
Right, yeah.
But it was eventually a matter of finding someone who hadn't signed an NDA, who I could trust, who really knew his stuff, and who could provide proof for everything he was saying. We reported allegations. Well, they are only allegations. I will say that. Not my allegations at all, but the allegations are kind of that former staff members accused the NST's management of racism or something like that, and xenophobia and discrimination to do with whether or not they were Japanese, and the accusations. I don't know. Whatever basis they have for being true, that is what happened. I reported on those allegations, and he put me in touch with more people. So I wanted to get the impression before I went forward with that stuff, that it wasn't just it wasn't just angry former NST workers working up a conspiracy to make them look bad.
Right.
I didn't want to let that happen, so I was very careful. I found people who had a better relationship with NST, people who worked there, people who had a good working relationship with NST before I posted that stuff, and I tried to get in touch with the management to get their side of the story as well. So I really worked hard on that before I posted it, and I was very careful. But it was just a matter of finding the right person to talk to, and then and then a handful of, I'd say about 5 people gave me the main meat of the story, I suppose, and all of the images, and there's a lot of unseen stuff in the video that has never previously been seen, like all of the CGI cutscenes. Those weren't posted anywhere before my video, and hopefully at some point in the coming months I'll post the introduction cutscene to the public, and they can I show that in the video. People can, I show most of it in the video, but people can just have a look at that. I guess that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. On the video side of things, then, seems like you've been doing a lot more of that recently.
Yeah.
Have you found that that has helped bring more eyeballs to the work that you do? Because I think that in this day and age, less and less people are going to sites and reading articles, and much more, coming to watch videos and all that kind of stuff. So do you think that has kind of widened your scope?
Yeah, my kind of approach with it originally was to just like start giving Unseen 64 articles like their own kind of video versions, I guess. So people could, as you say, people don't really have the time to do that, to sit and read a bunch of stuff. So I kind of decided, be cool to make these like entertaining little mini video documentaries on each game that we have a fairly substantial amount of information on, and then that was the kind of idea how it started, and then it gained quite a lot of traction, and I just decided at one point, instead of just limiting myself to just doing Unseen 64 stuff, people follow me for other things, and I can report on like the rumors I've heard and the kind of the leaked information on upcoming stuff that I get. Sometimes I can report on that, like the zombie the thing, the Zombie U port to the PS4. I knew about that.
Yes, yeah.
And so. And also more recently, the Metroid Mercury Steam game that was being worked on as well. I thought I could do that as well.
Yeah, it's also interesting because you do like a lot of independent stuff on your own as well as for Unseen 64, and I do see quite a lot of people online not being able to differentiate between the two and stuff like that. You found that difficult,
Yeah, a lot of people think that I am Unseen 64.
I think that's a big problem.
Some people think that it's just me. Some people assume Unseen 64 now is like some kind of like leak hub or something, and it's not.
Right.
It's just like an archive for cancelled games. And some people even think that Unseen 64 is a person. There's a lot of confusion about what it is. Some people think it's like my nickname or something, and people think, Unseen 64 said that. Oh, it's a lot of rubbish. But I think like the biggest kind of thing, like
misconception.
Yeah, the biggest misconception about it was, I got an email from a kid who was quite angry, and I thought at first he was joking, but he thought that Unseen 64 was some kind of independent, like, government body or something that goes around and cancels games.
Oh my god! No.
like he thought that it was some kind of like government sanctioned thing to stop certain games from being made. Like the government goes around and like sends us in, and we go, right, this is cancelled, and then we pop it on our website or something and report on it. I mean, I don't really. I don't know what I don't know how someone reaches that conclusion, but yeah, there are a lot of weird misconceptions like that around, and Unseen 64 is just an archive for cancelled games and cut content, essentially.
Yeah. I imagine it's similar to people who used to write into official Nintendo magazine thinking that they were Nintendo and asking them, like, make this game and all that stuff.
Yeah, and how people would say, like, when they give, like, a Mario game a high score, that people would be like, well, you would say that because you're Nintendo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's a little bit of a pitfall of the name official Nintendo magazine. But,
which is a shame.
It is, but yeah, they do good stuff. I was very curious about the idea of sources, right? And how a lot of people don't seem to understand that in situations where you have a piece of information, you don't necessarily want to reveal the name or the identity of the person who's given it to you, because it could jeopardize their career that they're currently in, or anything surrounding that. But you then kind of run into the problem where people are like, well, you didn't name them, so clearly you're just pulling this out of thin air. How do you deal with people like that, and the idea of sources?
I generally don't try to engage those people. Sometimes if they come to me and be like, and say that, well, I tried to explain, sometimes I just get pissed off and block them, to be totally honest. Like, sometimes I just don't have time for it, and I'm just like, I don't have time for this shit, man. I'm busy, and or when they're very accusatory, I mean, is when I kind of get annoyed. But I generally try to explain as best as I can, but I kind of get that a bit. I kind of have sympathy with that.
Right, yeah.
But people need to learn to appreciate that anonymous sourcing does not necessarily mean that we don't know who they are. Of course we know who they are. We're just protecting their names. And situations like the Chris Pranger thing happen when people come out on record and say these kind of not necessarily glowing things about companies and that kind of thing. So you want to give people protection and that kind of thing, and we have a responsibility to that, and I would never betray that. But I am kind of making strides towards naming sources. Like I'm by which I mean I'm trying to find sources that can be named more.
Right.
Just to
who are willing to be named.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who won't get sued, and so that will like kind of strengthen the report. The Kid Icarus game will have some named sources, I believe. There's some I've gotten some artists to talk about that game's development, and let me think of another example. Well, I spoke to Alex Ward over that F-Zero thing. I mentioned that in the article. There was an F-Zero. Nintendo asked them to do an F-Zero for the Wii U, if you don't remember.
Yeah, that was a great one.
Yeah. Oh, that hurt. And so I spoke to Alex Ward, and then Alex Ward came out on Twitter and spoke about that. So it's good to have things backed up by kind of public sources like that. But yeah, I mean, people will complain about nameless sources, and what can you do? I mean,
yeah, especially I think when it comes to like the bigger sites and stuff, they probably get some backlash on that. But Patrick Klepek does an article on Konami and doesn't name any of his sources, and
of course,
people are like, yeah, okay, they kind of understand.
Yeah,
but I think it's probably harder when you're an independent or working for a smaller site.
I think it's just a vocal minority of cynics at this point. I think some people are starting to see that I try to do what I think is in everyone's best interests.
And I'm sure Patrick Klepek is used to his vocal minority of cynics as well, isn't he?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt that.
Yeah, kind of segueing then into your own kind of personal feelings on like being able to keep stuff to yourself. Have you ever found it difficult, to not talk about something and keep it under wraps and always be wanting to put it out there but not being able to yet?
I'm terrible for that kind of thing. I think I'm generally a good person to keep confide in with like industry secrets, because like I hate teasing things, but like if you cracked my head open, you'd find a lot of interesting things in there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like, I really wish. It pains me that I can't talk about certain things, because I have heard a number of very strong allegations to do with like companies like Retro and Next Level Games and NCL, and I hear that kind of stuff all the time, and a lot of that I can back up and I could report on if I want to, but I choose not to because it's too much heat and I don't want to deal with that. I don't really want to take the risk. And
so there's a lot of stuff then that you haven't ever released and probably never intend to, I guess.
I think most of it I intend to release one day when it's safe,
Sure, yeah.
But I mean,
you don't know what's going to get picked up by the games media, and all of a sudden, like you said, you wake up after sleeping in and it's on the front page of IGN, and you think, oh, my inbox is full of emails.
Yeah, a lot of people like a couple of people criticize me for like teasing things, and that is just because I'm really passionate about this and I'm just genuinely really excited to
if you can't say it, you have to at least hint at some existence, right?
Like with like the Kid Icarus thing, I've been talking about that for ages, and that's just because that's something I'm really excited to be learning about. And
were you a big fan of Kid Icarus Uprising?
Oh yeah. I mean, I am a huge Kid Icarus fan. Like even the NES one, the Game Boy one, like lifelong fan of Kid Icarus, and like pretty much shit the bed when when Uprising was announced back in 2010, and Yeah, and that I don't really think anything would be coming out about this Kid Icarus game that we're going to talk about soon enough, unless there existed like a Kid Icarus fanboy as big as me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I guess you have to have like the passion for those projects.
yeah,
right?
yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of people kind of make out that I have some kind of anti-Nintendo agenda and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't go into the Project Hammer thing looking to like defame NST or anything. I just thought I talked to someone and they'd say, yeah, it didn't quite meet standards, we cancelled it. I thought I'd get that kind of a story, and then there's this whole thing about a horrible 5.5-year development where there was just tension between the management and the people working on it and all of this stuff, and I never set out to get those stories. They just kind of find me when I go looking for other things, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I guess moving on to, you know, some of the things that you've really enjoyed working on.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite project that you've put together?
I'm not really sure.
Picking between children, I guess, in some senses.
I don't really like look back on the things I do. I'm just I'm a kind of a person who's very on to the next thing immediately, because like it's people don't realize it is a shrinking window to preserve this stuff, because as I say, stuff is disappearing. Old websites, particularly from like the Wii era, are starting to vanish. You know, sites that hosted news that I could reference for research are going away, like CVG, ONM. Go Nintendo recently lost a lot of their stuff. I don't know if you saw, they had a problem like backing up some stuff, and certain articles from there have gone missing.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they had. I don't quite know what happened, but I've seen some things that were originally on Go Nintendo that have gone missing, and yeah. It is getting increasingly hard to kind of find things that were online during the 2000s. Yeah, I'm very much I feel a lot of pressure that I need to get it done as quick as I can and do all of these different things, and I have a big list of things that I want to get to. And there's also like, you know, developers will forget. You know, there's
right. You are relying on memory a lot of the time.
Yeah, you are. That is a huge problem. That is, you know, and there's also the matter of for people who have like stuff backed up on old hard drive, those hard drives are gonna fail eventually, and it is a rapidly shrinking window to preserve this kind of thing. So I'm very much onto the next thing, but. Yeah, to go back to your question, I'm not really sure. I think in terms of like how big a story was, I think I was quite proud of the Harry Potter thing, even if it was a bit of a fluke. I had people from like Harry Potter news sites come and thank me.
Oh man,
come and
there must be a lot of those.
Yeah, they came and like thanked me for that and say, you know, we're not used to that kind of research. Well done, thank you. And I was like, oh well, I'm flattered, and that was really nice. And it's really cool when like developers come forward and say, oh, I saw this thing you did. That was you know, thanks for, you know, this was nostalgic for me or whatever, and that's always nice. I think, you know, the Project Hammer one was big, but I didn't enjoy doing that because, you know, it was horrible. It was really kind of unpleasant to write and talk about, even if it was a big story and I was proud of it. It was not fun to write about. You know, I like the stories that are just fascinating in a more positive way. I think the Kid Icarus thing is probably the thing I'm most proud of, because there's nothing about that anywhere, and I think maybe the Kid Icarus thing, I don't know. I'm working on a lot of different things that haven't come out yet, so it's quite hard to say.
Okay, sure.
But I'm really proud of what I've been able to find out about the Kid Icarus thing so far.
Mm-hmm.
I it's a pain that I can't say more about it because I don't want to like diminish it when it comes out, but I'm really happy about it so far.
I'm sure people will be excited just knowing that it's going to come out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great to hear.
Yeah, so look forward to that. I think it's pretty interesting.
I guess maybe related to that then, is there an unreleased game that you have covered that you really wish hadn't been cancelled and that you personally would love to have come out? I imagine probably Kid Icarus is very high up the list there as well.
No, actually, I'm largely glad Kid Icarus wouldn't have happened because it's hard to kind of explain, but it would have been Kid Icarus, this Kid Icarus or Uprising. That was kind of...
Okay, so yeah.
That makes sense.
I think one couldn't exist without the other.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I think we couldn't have both, and Kid Icarus Uprising is about as good as that could have been. I think it's not perfect, but yeah.
So, is there another game unreleased
that you're okay to talk about? We should add.
One. This is not Nintendo related as well. Actually, it is. It was going to be on a Nintendo platform.
Okay.
But THQ was kind of funding a Marvel Avengers game, which was it was a first. I'm going to do a video on this at some point, as long as I can get Marvel to agree to the legal side of things.
Right.
I think I'm allowed to say this. I've played this game, the cancelled prototype for the Avengers game,
and was this Avengers game going to be based on the movie franchise? Was it a tie-in, or was this something else?
It was. It would have been released around the same time as the film, but it was an it was an original story, and it's
interesting because Bally and I were having a conversation about licensed games last show and how we just haven't seen them in so long. So it's interesting that there was one.
Yeah,
surrounding Avengers.
Yeah, there was an Avengers game called Battle for Earth.
Okay.
On the Wii U, it was like a bad fighting game,
right? Okay.
Like a brawler thing. So there is that, but yeah, they were doing this first-person Avengers game. It is a co-op thing where you pick an Avenger and kind of form your team with your friends, and you go online, or it would have been split screen co-op, and it's just so cool. I wish we could show more of the prototype. There are some videos. There's a long article about it on N64. It was going to come to the PC, PS3, Xbox 360, and I think the Wii U, and it looks really cool, and you can kind of see just it really captures what the Avengers is about. It was it was very team based. Everyone had very different powers and brought something different to the team. Thor brings his lightning, and he can summon that down, and each of the characters have team up moves, and it was just I played a little bit of it, and it's really fun, and I really wish that had come to fruition, but the circumstances that caused it to fall through are very unfortunate, because it was basically to do with the economic climate, and obviously THQ went the way it did, and
right, absolutely.
It was to do with the rising cost of the Australian dollar around the time.
Oh jeez!
Because
crazy factors outside of the control.
Yeah, because THQ's the Australian studio was the main team behind it, and also the team that made The Blob, what's called Blue Tongue, they were working on it as well with them, and that was the main project of both of those teams, and then the rising cost of the Aussie dollar, and THQ decided, things aren't going so well at THQ, we should kind of knock some people out of the lifeboat to try and survive. Right, you know what I mean? Yeah. So they closed Blue Tongue and this Australian THQ studio, and killed the Avengers game. It just so they could survive a couple more years, and then I really wish that hadn't happened, because it plays and it looks really cool. It's interesting.
I'm surprised that since then they haven't tried, because I mean there's been success in some areas of the licensed space. Obviously Batman, the Arkham games, the best example of that. So a good Avengers game would have been really a great thing to have.
I've heard rumors of Marvel looking into this kind of stuff more recently. I don't know what's going to come of it, but they see what Batman the Arkham series is doing. They're not just sitting on their loins and thinking, we don't need a piece of this pie. They do, and I'm sure Marvel is very protective of the licenses now. Mm-hmm. And they will do games when they think they have the right studio, I think, is what will happen.
I think Disney certainly right now are churning the Star Wars train at the moment. They are full in production on all of the Star Wars stuff, and I'm personally very excited about the Visceral game that Amy Hennig is working on. That's the one that I'm more interested in as opposed to Battlefront. But yeah, I think if they could get Marvel working on some stuff, yeah.
I really wanted like a Daredevil game. I don't know if you guys have seen like the Netflix series.
I have, yeah. I watched the Netflix series of Daredevil. It's fantastic.
That would make a badass video game. Although maybe not in the first person, because that might be a bit difficult.
A little bit, yeah. That would be certainly an interesting feat.
But I mean, a superhero game that's done as well as Batman, but with a superhero who actually has superpowers would be quite interesting. That would be nice stuff.
I would even be interested in just like a kind of if they just ripped off the Batman Arkham games with Daredevil and went with like the stealth, his kind of stealth things, and they have like similar hand-to-hand combat styles.
I think also certainly the tone of that Daredevil show is very similar to the tone of Batman.
Yeah, sure. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Maybe one day. I guess we'll close out then on talking about when events like E3 come around. Obviously, everyone's very excited about it, and they always want to find things out, about games that are coming. And you know some of this stuff beforehand. Yeah. Does it kind of deflate some of your personal excitement for events like that, knowing things before they're announced?
Sometimes, I think, I get what you mean.
Right,
but. People think I know everything. Like, people will come to me, like, saying, "What is The Last Guardian going to be there?" I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
I did find out things before. Like, I know there's going to be another Nier game. I knew that there was going to be the Final Fantasy remake. I knew that I knew Shenmue was going to be there. And I knew what did I know? I knew about like small things, but Nintendo is largely the thing I get most excited about. And and that was mostly kept under wraps from me because
I think they probably do the best job of keeping their stuff under wraps in Nintendo.
Nintendo's like a brick wall, and the only real thing I found out about was the Hyrule Warriors.
Right, I remember on Twitter you just dropped this link out of nowhere. I was like, oh, okay, well that's interesting.
Someone who shall remain nameless sent that to me. Who not someone related to Techno Koei, and but Techno Koei for some reason had that link unlisted instead of private, and I think
that's a terrible idea.
I think that might have been just a small human error. But it enabled the link to get out, and it found me, and then I posted it. So occasionally that kind of thing happens. That is a rare situation, but generally I don't know about Nintendo stuff that much. It's other companies, like I knew the Rare Replay collection was coming. I knew about Rare's game. I know a fair bit about Microsoft and some of Sony, but generally not much of. It's mostly like EA and Ubisoft and those kind of companies that you get leaks from. But
I think they try as well to get ahead of E3 if they can to. Have the focus on their game for a day, before E3 starts, because otherwise, you just get drowned out by everything else.
I think largely it has the opposite effect on me, that I get more excited because I hear a rumor about like, oh, maybe there's gonna be Shenmue 3, and I'm like, is there gonna be Shenmue 3? Like, this guy says it's gonna happen. Could it be? And a lot of that time. This year I largely kept quiet about that stuff because a lot of people nowadays are very sensitive about like quote unquote spoilers, and they don't want people to take away from that, so I don't.
And to some degree that can go too far, because when you kind of step back from it, E3 is basically this huge marketing thing where they just show you products, yes, like it's exciting and everything, but take a step back and it's like, okay, we're very consumerist here, and we're just getting excited because they're showing us a video game.
To such a point, I think it's quite petty, but I kind of get what it means. I know what it's like to be excited about E3 and be in the dark and that, so I appreciate what that's like from just from growing up in that. So so I don't I generally don't try to open too many presents before Christmas, but
right. And I think the Hyrule Warriors thing wasn't even like, it's a port of a Wii U game, and it would have been a surprise. But I think it's a nice primer,
Yeah, originally they weren't going to show that in the presentation.
Yeah, you were saying that they were going to show it beforehand.
Yeah, and if you look at if you look back at that 2015 Nintendo briefing, it seems that was definitely true, because it's weird how it's edited. It's like what's his name? Onuma, and I said Inafune. Yes. Onuma.
Yeah.
Onuma is like talking over the trailer and stuff, and it's weird, like how they presented it. I don't know. I just kind of got the impression that might have been true, and it really wasn't going to be shown. Yeah, because I was shown that it was scheduled to be released like a couple of days before the E3 or something,
right,
just to space things out, because it wasn't like a huge announcement. But I guess they decided in the end to put it in the thing. I don't know what happened there. Maybe that wasn't true, but that was what I heard, and that's why I decided to release that one.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly interesting. Certainly got me very excited.
Yeah.
Before E3 happened. So yeah. Well, thank you, Liam, for coming here and talking with us about all this stuff. It's been very enlightening and
no
really interesting to hear about all this stuff. And I think we're probably going to wrap up the show here. So before we go, we're going to plug ourselves and talk about things like that. So Liam, how about you go first? Where can people find all the stuff you do, Twitter and all that?
So my main kind of hub of content is my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/unseen64tomiki, and it can also be reached at youtube.com/Liam Productions.
Right, that's the original name of your YouTube channel. As I have found with my one, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass when you kind of start with one thing and want to change it. It's doable now with the new YouTube, I guess.
Yeah, so you can find out either of those URLs. Or you can just get me on Twitter, and I'm at Doctor, that's the full word, Doctor_Cupcakes, which...
An excellent Twitter username,
yes,
if I say so myself.
Thank you.
So yeah. And you also have a Patreon for Unseen64.
Oh yeah, so the Patreon it just goes towards the site. Quite a few people get the idea that like this is for like us, like our personal kind of lifestyle, or like to go to a beefer one. It's not. It just goes towards keeping the servers online, and we've paid off the servers until like 2016 now, but it all goes towards like a preservation funds if we want to buy like prototypes to have on the site or something like that, I mean,
none of that stuff is free, upkeep of a website costs money.
The web keeping up a big website with lots of content on it is it costs a lot of money. So yeah, that is essentially, if you want to try, donate a little bit. We reveal secrets early on the podcast we do exclusively for the Patreons, and also you get all of the Unseen64 videos like a couple of weeks early, sometimes months, it depends. And also you get access to content that we legally can't post on the website. Like we have like a 5-minute demo of this unreleased like Epic Games project that they worked on a couple of years ago, and you can get access to all of that for only $1. So I think that's pretty good. I think they're doing a pretty good job over there of justifying being a patron. So
I very recently started supporting you guys on Patreon, and I have to say mainly for the podcast, because I am a podcast fanatic and fiend, and I need all the audio I can get. And you guys do a fantastic job with that show as well.
Thanks.
So do go ahead over there and give them some money and help them out, and support all the stuff that they do. Bally, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. And that's also my name on the Miiverse. So go check me out there on those.
Have you been posting much Rayman Legends on the Miiverse?
I have a little bit, and I'll definitely post some more. The next game down the line, which I've not decided what it's going to be yet, but
We will see. We'll see indeed. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Lordnbz. That is my Miiverse name as well. And you can follow us on Twitter as a podcast. Our podcast name is at TNL Podcast. We post stuff there that we do, like video stuff sometimes, and just when the show goes out on YouTube and on iTunes and all the other places, it's the first place to go, port of call. It's a nice little hub, so do be sure to follow us over there. And you can also send us emails. Bally, remind them of the email address.
Please send your emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We've got episode 50 coming up, so we'd love to hear sort of when you started listening to the show, what you think of the show, what are some of the things you've enjoyed up to episode 50, and some of the things you've hated, if you want to tell us.
No, none of that.
Well.
No,
that'd be great. It'd be nice to talk about.
No criticism.
It'd be nice to talk about the show in episode 50, so anything related to that would be fantastic.
Indeed. Yeah, that'll be soon. As always, you can find the show in a variety of places. iTunes is the best place. We have our whole archive there. You can go to Stitcher, which is a nice app, which is very helpful for listening to podcasts. And we're on YouTube as well, although the YouTube version goes up a little bit later than the audio. So if you are wanting to get it straight away, then you know what? You've got to go to one of these services and download it, I'll tell you. So that is pretty much going to be us for this week. Thank you once again, Liam, for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
And yeah, hopefully
keep doing what you're doing. The gaming industry needs it.
Oh,
exactly. You. As you know, Colin Moriarty preaches, and I agree with him. The stuff that you do is the real gaming journalism, you know, and there are not many people out there doing it. So keep it up.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate it. That's very encouraging.
Indeed. So we will see you guys in a couple of weeks' time. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.
The musical interludes used in today's show were Castle Rock from Rayman Legends, copyright Ubisoft 2013, and the Overworld theme from Conker's Bad Fur Day, copyright Rare 2001.